3 weeks had passed since the night of the attack. Daniel's ribs had mostly healed. Patricia's bruised throat had faded to yellow. Henry had survived his wounds and was recovering in a hospital 2 counties away. Carol had not been so lucky, but her death had not been in vain. The information Lily carried in her memory had spread through channels that Daniel didn't fully understand. Former intelligence officers, retired military personnel, investigators who had spent years chasing missing persons cases that never made sense. They had all been waiting for proof that their suspicions were real. Now they had it. A network had formed in the shadows. Humans from every background, united by a single purpose: end the slavers, free the captives, make Earth a place where no one was cargo. The hub that Lily described was located 200 miles away. It looked like an abandoned warehouse complex from the outside, but beneath the surface was a facility where beings from across the galaxy conducted their trade in living creatures. Daniel stood at the front of the assault team. 47 humans had answered the call. Soldiers and farmers and teachers and parents. They carried human weapons that the slavers dismissed as primitive. They wore no armor that could stop energy bolts. By any logical measure, they should have been terrified. They weren't. Patricia stood beside Daniel with her shotgun loaded and ready. Behind them waited people who had lost children to mysterious disappearances. People who had seen the evidence and refused to look away. People who had decided that some things were worth dying for. Everyone understands the plan? Patricia asked. Nods all around. The plan was simple. Hit fast. Hit hard. Don't stop until every cage was empty and every slaver was down. Rescue first. Everything else second. Then let's move, Daniel said. They went in through 3 entry points simultaneously. The slavers had guards, but they were used to dealing with frightened captives, not armed humans with nothing left to lose. The first wave of defenders went down in seconds. Daniel moved through the corridors with focused rage. He saw cages filled with beings of a dozen species. Small ones, young ones, all of them watching with eyes that had forgotten hope. "We're here to help," he kept saying as his team broke locks and opened doors. "You're safe now. We're taking you home." Not all of them understood his words, but they understood his actions. One by one, the captives stumbled out of their prisons and followed the humans toward the exits. The slavers regrouped in the central chamber. A dozen of them, including 3 of the reptilian Corax enforcers. They had better weapons and better training, but they also had something the humans didn't have. They had something to lose. The battle was brief and brutal. Energy weapons scorched the walls. Human bullets found their targets. 2 of Daniel's people fell and didn't get back up. But the slavers fell faster. When it was over, Daniel stood in the middle of the chamber with blood on his hands and smoke in his lungs. The remaining slavers had surrendered or fled. The facility belonged to the humans now. And in the lowest level, they found what they had come for. 30-7 captives. 22 of them human. Men and women and children who had been taken from their lives and prepared for transport to distant worlds. They blinked in the light like moles emerging from underground. Some of them had been missing for years. Among the non-human captives were 3 small figures, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Verith children. Lily had insisted on coming despite Daniel's protests. She stood beside him now as they opened the last cage. The 3 Verith children looked at her with wonder and confusion. She was one of them, but she walked freely beside the humans. Lily spoke to them in her own language. Soft words that Daniel couldn't understand, but he understood their effect. The fear in the children's eyes began to fade. One of them, a girl even smaller than Lily, reached out and touched her scarred arm. They talked for a long time. Lily translated for Daniel when he asked. "They want to know if it's really over." I told them it's just beginning. But the beginning is good. The beginning is freedom. The cleanup took days. Human authorities arrived. People Patricia trusted who had waited years for this moment. Evidence was gathered. Connections were traced. The slavers had operated in shadows for 30 years. Now those shadows were burning away. Galactic authorities arrived 3 days later. Daniel watched their ship descend from the sky and felt Lily grip his hand tightly. She was scared. These were the same beings who had ignored her species' pleas for help when the slavers first attacked. The same beings who had let Earth become a lawless trading post. A delegation emerged from the ship. Tall, elegant creatures with silver skin and eyes like polished stone. They looked at the ruined warehouse, at the freed captives, at the humans standing guard with their primitive weapons. One of them approached Daniel. She seemed to be the leader. "We came expecting to investigate a minor trafficking outpost," she said. Her voice was musical but cold. "Instead, we find that humans have dismantled one of the largest slaving operations in the outer sectors. Without authorization, without galactic support, without any of the proper protocols." Daniel met her silver eyes without flinching. "We didn't need your permission to protect our own." The alien studied him for a long moment. Then her gaze moved to Lily, still holding Daniel's hand. "This child. She was the source of your intelligence. A remarkable feat, given her age and circumstances." Lily stepped forward. She pressed her hand to her heart in the Varith gesture of respect, then spoke in a clear, strong voice. "These humans found me when I had given up hope. They healed me when I expected more pain. They fought for me when it would have been easier to turn away. They asked nothing in return except that I help them save others." She looked back at Daniel with love shining in her dark eyes. "I was cargo to the galaxy. I was nothing. But to them, I was family from the first moment. That is what humans are. That is why they will change everything." The alien leader was quiet for a long time. Around her, the other delegates murmured among themselves. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Earth has been ignored by the Galactic Council for too long. Your species was considered too primitive, too violent, too unpredictable. Perhaps we were wrong about what those traits could mean." She looked at Daniel with something that might have been respect. "We will be watching humanity more closely from now on. I suspect you will continue to surprise us." The delegation returned to their ship and departed. The freed captives were transported to proper medical facilities. The Varth children went with them, but not before each of them embraced Lily and thanked her in their own language. That evening, Daniel sat on the porch of his grandmother's farmhouse. The old house still had holes in the walls and scorch marks from the attack. It would take months to repair, but it still felt like home. Lily sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket against the cool Kansas night. Her scars were still visible, but they no longer seemed to define her. She had proven that she was more than her wounds. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Daniel looked out at the stars appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there were other children in cages, other beings who needed help. The work was far from finished. "Now we rebuild," he said. "This farmhouse, our lives, everything the slavers tried to take from us. And when we're ready, we find the next fight, and the one after that." Lily leaned against his shoulder. "Together?" "Together, always." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something in her own language, the same phrase she had used before the battle. "You are my heart," she translated, "and I am yours." Daniel put his arm around her thin shoulders and held her close. A year ago, he had been a broken man with nothing to live for. Now he had a daughter from the stars and a purpose worth fighting for. The universe was vast and full of darkness, but it was also full of people who needed help. People who had given up hope. People who didn't know yet that humans were coming to protect them. coming to fight for them, coming to prove that family wasn't about species or blood or where you came from. Family was about who you chose to love, and who you would never, ever stop fighting for. Daniel looked down at Lily and smiled. "Welcome home, little one," he said. And for the first time since he found her in that dark cellar, Lily smiled back. They came back 3 nights later. Not just the 3 from before, but a dozen more. Vehicles blocked the road in both directions. Figures moved through the fields with weapons that glowed with strange light. At the center of it all walked the same reptilian creature, its yellow eyes burning with anger. Daniel had prepared as best he could. Patricia had called in favors, and 2 of her old contacts had arrived to help. But 4 people against 12 attackers with alien technology was not a fair fight. Daniel knew that. He had decided it didn't matter. Lily was hidden in a place they would never find. A cave system 3 miles away that Patricia had discovered decades ago during her time in military intelligence. She had begged Daniel to come with her. He had refused. "Someone has to slow them down," he had said. "Someone has to give you time to get away." She had looked at him with those huge dark eyes and said something in her own language. Then she translated it for him. "That means you are my heart," she said softly. "In my language, we say that to the people who saved us, the people we would die to protect." "Nobody's dying tonight," Daniel had replied. But he wasn't sure he believed it. Now, he crouched behind an overturned tractor in the barnyard, watching the attackers approach. Patricia was in the farmhouse with a rifle at each window. Her 2 contacts, a man named Henry and a woman named Carol, had taken positions in the tree line. The reptilian creature called out in a voice that carried across the fields. "Human, we know you're here. Give us the Verith child, and we will leave you in peace. Continue to resist, and everyone dies. The choice is simple." Daniel stayed silent. His grandfather's hunting rifle felt heavy in his hands. It seemed like a toy compared to the weapons the attackers carried. The creature made a gesture, and its soldiers moved forward. They spread out in a line, sweeping toward the farm buildings with professional coordination. These weren't just criminals. They had training. They had done this before. Patricia fired first. Her shot hit one of the human smugglers in the shoulder, and he went down screaming. Henry and Carol opened fire from the trees a second later. 2 more attackers fell. Then, the return fire started, and Daniel understood just how badly outmatched they were. Bolts of energy tore through the night. The tractor he hid behind sparked and melted where the shots hit. One blast passed so close to his head that he felt the heat on his face. He fired back blindly, knowing he probably wouldn't hit anything but needing to do something. A scream came from the tree line. Carol's voice cut short. Daniel ran toward the farmhouse. Weapons fire chased him across the open ground. He felt something burn along his ribs and stumbled but kept moving. He crashed through the back door and found Patricia reloading with blood running down her arm. "Henry's down," she said flatly. "Carol, too. It's just us now." The front door exploded inward. The reptilian creature stood in the opening, too tall to fit through without ducking. Its yellow eyes swept the room until they found Daniel. "Enough games," it said. "Where's the child?" Patricia raised her rifle. The creature moved faster than anything that Sci should move. One clawed hand knocked the weapon aside. The other grabbed Patricia by the throat and lifted her off the ground. "I will ask one more time," the creature said. "Then I will start breaking bones." Daniel lunged forward with nothing but his bare hands. The creature swatted him aside like a fly. He hit the wall hard and slid to the floor. Something cracked in his chest. Through blurred vision, he saw the creature tighten its grip on Patricia's throat. She was turning purple, her feet kicking uselessly in the air. Then a voice spoke from the doorway. A small voice, speaking in a language that wasn't English. Lily She stood in the broken doorframe, small and scarred and shaking with fear. But she didn't run. She spoke directly to the creature in its own tongue, the words flowing from her with cold precision. The creature dropped Patricia and turned to face Lily. Its expression changed. Confusion first, then something like concern. Lily kept speaking. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he recognized the tone. She was making a threat. This tiny abused child was threatening a 7-foot monster. When she finished, the creature stood very still. Then it responded in the same language. Lily answered. They went back and forth for several minutes, their voices rising and falling like people negotiating. Finally, Lily switched to English. She looked at the creature with eyes that had seen too much darkness to be afraid of anything anymore. I know where the hub is, she said. The main station. The one where all the shipments pass through. Names, schedules, the identity of the overseer himself, everything. The creature's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Varax of Clan Meridian, Lily said steadily. Third spawn of the brood mother. You were sold to the network when you were young, just like me. You rose through the ranks by being cruel enough to make them forget you were once a slave yourself. The creature, Varax, went completely still. Whatever Lily had just said, it had hit deep. If you harm these humans, Lily continued, the information goes out. I've already arranged it. Beings you've never met will send everything I know to the Galactic Council, to the Free Traders Guild, to everyone who has a reason to see your operation burn. You'll be hunted across every sector of known space. You're a child, Varax hissed. You don't have those kinds of contacts. Lily smiled. It was a terrible smile for such a young face. I was a prisoner for many years. I had nothing to do but watch and listen and remember. And I had one friend, a communications officer who felt sorry for me. He showed me how the networks worked before they killed him. I learned more than you think. Daniel pulled himself up from the floor, his ribs screaming in protest. He watched the confrontation between the scarred alien girl and the monster who had come to take her. He finally understood something important. Lily wasn't just a victim. She was a survivor. And survivors learned to fight with whatever weapons they could find. The standoff held. Varax looked at his remaining soldiers, then at the injured humans, then at Lily. The calculation in his eyes was obvious. Could he risk calling her bluff? Then the sound of sirens reached them, distant but getting closer. Patricia must have triggered the silent alarm before the attack started. Varax made his decision. He barked an order to his soldiers, and they began to retreat. But before he left, he turned back to Lily with hatred burning in his yellow eyes. This isn't over, little one. We'll find a way to reach you. We'll find a way to silence you forever. Lily walked forward until she was standing right in front of the creature. She barely came up to his waist. But she looked up at him without flinching. Then come, she said quietly. But know this. You're not the only one who wants your operation destroyed. And I'm not alone anymore. She turned and looked at Daniel, still struggling to breathe with his broken ribs. Then at Patricia, rubbing her bruised throat but already reaching for another weapon. I have family now, Lily said. And humans protect their families with everything they have. You've never faced anything like that before. None of you kind of. Varax stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes that might have been doubt. Then he turned and walked into the night, his soldiers following behind him. Daniel limped to Lily's side. He put his hand on her thin shoulder and felt her trembling. All that bravery had cost her everything she had. That was stupid, he said hoarsely. Coming back here. You were supposed to stay hidden. Lily looked up at him with tears finally breaking free from her dark eyes. Couldn't let them hurt you, she whispered. Not for me. Not ever for me. Daniel pulled her into a gentle hug, careful of his broken ribs. She pressed her face against his chest and sobbed. All the fear and strength and desperation came pouring out of her in waves. "You said something earlier," Daniel murmured into her hairless head. "That word. Your heart. You said I was your heart." She nodded against his chest. "Well," Daniel said softly, "I think you're mine too. And family doesn't run from danger. Family faces it together." Outside, the sirens grew louder. Help was coming. But Daniel knew the fight was far from over, thought it was just beginning. Patricia Walsh had lived next to the Cooper farmhouse for 40 years. She had watched Daniel grow up during summer visits to his grandmother. She had sent flowers when his wife died. And she had noticed immediately when something strange started happening at the old farm. Daniel was buying too much food for one person. He kept his curtains closed all day. He watched the road like a man expecting trouble. Patricia had served 20 years in the army and another 10 doing things she couldn't talk about. She knew the signs of someone protecting a secret. On the 10th day after Daniel found Lily, Patricia knocked on his door. Daniel answered with tired eyes and 2 days of beard on his face. He looked at her like she was another problem he didn't need. But Patricia had known him since he was 5 years old. She wasn't going anywhere until she got answers. "You going to invite me in, or are we doing this on the porch?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. Then he looked past her at the empty road and stepped aside to let her enter. She saw Lily immediately. The small blue figure sat frozen at the kitchen table, ready to bolt. Those huge dark eyes watched Patricia with pure terror. The old woman had seen a lot of strange things in her life, but nothing quite like this. "Well," Patricia said calmly, "that explains the extra groceries." The next hour was a conversation Daniel never expected to have. He told Patricia everything. The hidden cellar, the chains and the scars, the drawings that showed a galaxy full of horrors, and the black card that kept driving past the farm. Patricia listened without interrupting. When Daniel finished, she walked over to Lily and crouched down to her level. "May I look at those scars, sweetheart?" Patricia asked gently. "I used to be a medic. I want to make sure they're healing right." Lily looked at Daniel. He nodded, and slowly, the alien girl extended her scarred arms toward the old woman. Patricia examined the wounds with professional care. Her face stayed calm, but Daniel saw her jaw tighten. She had treated soldiers who had been tortured by enemies. She recognized what she was seeing. "Some of these got infected at some point," Patricia said quietly. "She's lucky to be alive." "No, not lucky. Strong. This child is stronger than anyone I've ever met." Lily didn't understand all the words, but she understood the tone. Her eyes filled with something that might have been tears if her species could cry. Patricia stood up and looked at Daniel with hard eyes. "Tell me about the car." He described it. Black sedan, tinted windows, no visible plates. It had driven past 6 more times in the past 3 days. Always slow. Always looking. Whoever it was, they were searching for something. "They're coming back for her," Daniel said. "The people who kept her in that cellar. Maybe they think she saw something or knows something. Either way, they're going to come." Patricia nodded slowly. "Then we need to be ready." She left and came back an hour later with a truck full of supplies. Motion sensors, security cameras, a satellite phone that couldn't be traced, and weapons. Several of them. "I made some calls," Patricia said as she unloaded the equipment. "Old friends who know things. What you found here, Daniel, it's not an isolated case. There are people in our government who know about alien contact. Have known for decades. But they've kept it quiet, and that silence created opportunities for the worst kinds of people." She set up the security system while Daniel watched and learned. Lily stayed close to both of them, understanding that these preparations were for her protection. The slavers who took her, Patricia continued, they've been operating on Earth for at least 30 years. This planet sits in a lawless sector of space. No galactic government claims jurisdiction here. That makes us a perfect stopping point for illegal cargo. Cargo, Daniel repeated bitterly. They're calling people cargo. Humans too, Patricia said. Her voice was cold. Thousands of missing persons cases over the years. Runaways and homeless people and anyone who won't be missed. They take them off-world and sell them to anyone with credits. Daniel felt sick. He looked at Lily and imagined human children in the same cages she had described. Human children with the same scars. That night, the black car came back. But this time, it didn't just drive past. Daniel saw the headlights through the curtains. 3 figures got out. 2 of them moved like humans. The third was taller and walked with a strange, swaying motion that wasn't human at all. Patricia was already at the back door with Lily. Storm shelter, she whispered. I prepared it yesterday. She'd be safe there. Lily grabbed Daniel's hand. Her dark eyes were wide with fear, but also with something else. Determination. She had survived 3 years in a cellar. She wasn't going to give up now. Go with Patricia, Daniel said softly. I'll be okay. I promise. Lily looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something she had never done before. She pressed her hand against her heart, the gesture of deep gratitude, and then pressed the same hand against his heart. Danielle, she whispered. Family. She had learned that word just yesterday. Daniel's chest tightened as he understood what she was telling him. After everything she had been through, after every being who had hurt her or sold her or locked her in darkness, she had decided to trust again. She had decided that he was worth trusting. Family, Daniel agreed. Now go, quickly. Patricia led Lily out the back door and into the night. Daniel watched them disappear into the darkness, then turned to face the front of the house. A knock came at the door. Hard and demanding. Daniel opened it. 2 men stood on the porch. They wore plain clothes but moved like soldiers. Behind them, barely visible in the shadows, was a creature that made Daniel's skin crawl. It stood 7 feet tall with scales like a reptile and eyes that glowed faintly yellow in the dark. Its mouth was full of pointed teeth. Good evening, one of the men said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We're looking for something that belongs to us. We think it might have ended up on this property. Daniel leaned against the doorframe and kept his voice calm. I just inherited this place from my grandmother. Not sure what you're talking about. The reptilian creature pushed forward. It inhaled deeply through slits in its face, tasting the air. Then it spoke in a voice like gravel scraping together. The Vareth was here, recently. I can smell her fear. Daniel's hand moved toward the rifle, leaning against the wall inside the door. But before he could reach it, a click sounded from the darkness beside the house. Patricia stepped into the light. She held a shotgun pointed directly at the reptilian creature's chest. Gentlemen, she said calmly, and whatever the hell you are, I think you should leave now. The creature turned to face her. Its yellow eyes narrowed with contempt. You don't know what you're interfering with, old woman. We represent interests far beyond your primitive understanding. Patricia smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Son, I've been killing things scarier than you since before you were hatched. You've got exactly 30 seconds to get off this property. After that, I start making examples. The standoff held for a long moment. Daniel watched the 2 human smugglers exchange nervous glances. They hadn't expected resistance. They had expected to frighten some simple farmer and take what they wanted. The reptilian creature was harder to read. But even it seemed to recognize something dangerous in Patricia's eyes. Something that said she had seen worse than them and was still standing. This isn't over, the creature hissed. The child knows things that could destroy us. We will return with more forces. You cannot protect her forever. Maybe not, Patricia replied. But I can protect her tonight. And tomorrow night. And every night until you run out of people to send. Now get moving. Your 30 seconds are up. The smugglers retreated to their car. The engine started, and the headlights swept across the farmhouse as they turned around. Then they were gone, swallowed by the Kansas night. Daniel let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Patricia lowered her shotgun and looked at him with steady eyes. That bought us some time, she said. Not much. They'll be back with more people and heavier weapons. We need help. More than just the two of us. Who? Daniel asked. Who do we call? The police? The military? They'll just take Lily away. Patricia shook her head slowly. There are others. People who've been waiting for proof that what they suspected was real. People who are angry enough to fight. She paused. And there's Lily herself. That creature said she knows things. Things that could destroy their operation. We need to find out what she saw. Daniel nodded. He walked to the storm shelter and opened the door. Lily sat inside, small and scared but alive. Still alive. Still fighting. It's okay, he said, reaching down to help her up. They're gone for now. Lily climbed out and looked around at the dark fields. Then she looked at Daniel and Patricia, the two humans who had stood between her and her captors. More will come, she said in her careful English. Many more. They fear what I know. Then tell us, Patricia said gently. Tell us everything. And let us show you what humans do when we're given a reason to fight. 1 week had passed since Daniel found the alien girl in the cellar. 7 days of slow progress and careful patience. 7 days of learning to understand each other without words. He called her Lily now. On the 3rd day, he had carried her to the window to show her the fields outside. Wild lily grew along the fence line, purple and white flowers dancing in the breeze. She had pointed at them and made a soft sound of wonder. It was the first time he had seen anything other than fear in her eyes. Lily, Daniel had said, pointing at the flowers. Then he pointed at her. Lily. She had looked at him for a long moment. Then she pointed at herself and repeated the sound. Lee, Lee. Close enough. Now she followed him everywhere. She stayed 3 feet behind him at all times, ready to run if needed, but unwilling to let him out of her sight. She had learned that he was safe. She had not yet learned that the world could be safe. 2. Daniel had found some of his grandmother's old clothes in a closet. They were too big for Lily, but she wore them anyway. A faded blue dress that hung past her knees. Thick socks that bunched around her ankles. She seemed to like the softness of the fabric against her scarred skin. The scars told a story Daniel wished he didn't have to read. Some were old, faded to pale lines on her blue skin. Others were newer, still raised and angry looking. The burns on her arms came from something hot pressed against her flesh on purpose. The cuts on her back followed a pattern, like someone had been counting something. Daniel didn't ask about them. He didn't need to know the details. He already knew enough to feel a cold rage building in his chest. Someone had tortured this child. Someone had treated her like property. And that someone was still out there somewhere. On the 5th day, Lily started drawing pictures. Daniel had given her some paper and pencils from his work supplies. He thought she might like to color or scribble, the way human children did. Instead, she started telling her story. The first drawing showed a planet with 2 moons. Her home world. The second showed her people, beings that looked like her but taller and stronger. They had the same blue skin and large dark eyes. She called them something that sounded like Varith and touched her chest. When she said it, the 3rd drawing made Daniel's hand shake. It showed large ships descending from the sky. It showed her people running and falling. It showed Lily being grabbed by figures in dark armor and dragged away from bodies on the ground. Slavers, Daniel said quietly. He didn't know why he used that word, but he knew it was right. Lily nodded. She understood that word. She had learned it the hard way. The drawings continued. A ship full of cages. A market where beings of all kinds were sold. Different owners, each one drawn with sharp, angry lines. And finally, a place she called Earth, a planet outside the law. A place where illegal trades happened because no one was watching. Daniel's grandmother's farmhouse was not the only stop on Lily's journey, but it was the one where things went wrong. A deal fell apart. Someone got scared, and Lily was left behind in the cellar. Too valuable to kill, but too dangerous to move. She had been down there for almost 3 years. Daniel had to leave the room when she told him that part. He went outside and stood in the Kansas wind and tried to breathe through the anger that filled his chest. 3 years. A child alone in the dark for 3 years. Surviving on whatever food her captors remembered to bring. Waiting for someone to either save her or end her suffering. When he came back inside, Lily was watching him with worried eyes. She thought she had done something wrong. She thought he was angry at her. Daniel knelt down in front of her and very slowly took her small blue hands in his own. "Not angry at you," he said carefully. "Angry for you. There's a difference." She didn't understand all the words, but she understood his eyes. She understood his gentle touch. Some things didn't need translation. The language lessons went both ways. Daniel taught Lily English words, and she learned them quickly. Her mind was sharp despite everything she had been through. By the end of the first week, she could say simple sentences. "Water, please. More food. Thank you." Dan-YEL. She also taught him things. Gestures that her people used instead of words. A hand pressed to the heart meant gratitude. Eyes closed with head tilted meant trust. And when she was scared, she would make herself as small as possible and go completely still, like a rabbit hiding from a wolf. She still flinched at sudden sounds. She still ate like every meal might be her last. She still woke up screaming from nightmares that Daniel couldn't chase away. But slowly, day by day, she was learning that not all hands were meant to hurt. On the 7th day, Daniel saw the black car. He was outside fixing the porch steps when it drove past on the dirt road. It moved slowly, like the driver was looking for something. An hour later, it drove past again from the other direction. Daniel watched it disappear around the bend and felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Nobody used that road. It led only to his grandmother's farm and an abandoned property beyond. There was no reason for anyone to be driving past unless they were looking for this place specifically. He went inside and found Lily drawing at the kitchen table. She looked up at him and immediately knew something was wrong. Her body went rigid. Her eyes darted to the windows and doors, calculating escape routes. "It's okay," Daniel said, even though he wasn't sure it was true. "We're just going to be careful, that's all." He closed all the curtains. He locked all the doors. He moved Lily to the back bedroom where she couldn't be seen from outside. She went without question, trusting him to know what to do. Daniel sat by the front window with the curtains cracked, just enough to see the road. His grandfather's old hunting rifle leaned against the wall beside him. He hadn't fired it in years, but he remembered how the black car didn't come back that night. But Daniel knew it would return. Whoever had used this farmhouse as a prison hadn't forgotten about it. Maybe they had hired something. Maybe they had come back to check on their investment and found the cellar empty. They would come back. They would look for Lily, and they would find Daniel waiting for them. He looked at the small alien girl sleeping in the back bedroom. She had curled up in a ball on the bed, wrapped in 3 blankets, one hand clutching the broken device she always carried. Even in sleep, she was ready to run. Daniel made another silent promise. Not just to protect her now, but to give her a future. A real future where she didn't have to be afraid. Where her scars could fade and her nightmares could stop and she could just be a child again. It was a big promise. Maybe too big for one man to keep. But Daniel Cooper had nothing left to lose and someone worth fighting for. That was a dangerous combination. Let them come, he thought as the night grew dark. Let them try to take her. They would learn what humans did when someone threatened their family. Daniel Cooper stood in the kitchen of his grandmother's old farmhouse and looked at the rotted floor. The wood was dark with water damage and soft in places. He pressed his boot against one board and it cracked under his weight. This whole section needed to come out. He had inherited the house 6 months ago, but only now found the strength to deal with it. His grandmother had been gone for 8 years. The house had sat empty all that time, slowly falling apart. Daniel planned to fix it up and sell it. He needed the money and he needed something to keep his hands busy. 2 years since his wife passed and he still woke up reaching for her side of the bed. The Kansas afternoon sun came through dirty windows as Daniel pried up the first board. The wood came apart easily, too soft to resist. He pulled up another board and then another. The smell of old rot and damp earth rose from below. Then he stopped. There was a space under the floor. Not just the usual crawl space he expected. This was deeper. He could see rough stone walls going down into darkness. A cellar that wasn't on any of the building plans he had found in his grandmother's papers. Daniel got his flashlight from his toolbox and pointed it down into the hole. Stone steps led into the dark. The cellar was maybe 10 feet deep and about the size of a small room. He could see shapes down there. Old boxes. A sleeping mat on the ground. Empty food containers. Someone had been living down here. His heart beat faster as he widened the hole in the floor. He was about to climb down when he heard a sound. A small sound. Like a frightened animal trying to stay quiet. But failing. Daniel moved a flashlight beam slowly across the cellar. In the far corner, pressed against the wall, he saw something that made him forget to breathe. It was a child. But not a human child. The creature had pale blue skin that looked thin and delicate. Large dark eyes reflected his flashlight beam like a cat's eyes. The head was slightly larger than a human head and completely hairless. The body was small and thin, far too thin. He could see bones pressing against that blue skin, and the scars. Dear God, the scars. The child's arms and neck and face were covered with old wounds. Some looked like burns. Others were long cuts that had healed badly. Whoever this creature was, someone had hurt her very badly for a very long time. She tried to run. She pushed herself up from the corner and stumbled toward the far wall, looking for an escape that wasn't there. But her legs gave out after 3 steps, and she fell to the stone floor. Daniel climbed down the steps without thinking. His only thought was that this was a hurt child, and hurt children needed help. It didn't matter that she wasn't human. It didn't matter that his mind was screaming questions he couldn't answer. What mattered was the terror in those dark eyes. He stopped several feet away from her and lowered himself to the ground. He made himself small and non-threatening. He had done the same thing with scared dogs and cats over the years. Slow movements. Soft voice. No sudden gestures. "Hey there," he said quietly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I promise." She didn't understand his words. That was clear. But she responded to his tone. Her trembling slowed just a little. Her breathing was still fast and panicked, but she wasn't trying to crawl away anymore. Daniel looked around the cellar while keeping his voice low and gentle. He kept talking, saying nothing important, just letting her hear that his voice meant no harm. What he saw made his stomach turn. There were old chains bolted to one wall. A metal collar lay on the ground near the sleeping mat. The food containers were empty cans and packages, the kind you could buy at any grocery store. Someone had been keeping this child prisoner down here. Someone had been feeding her just enough to keep her alive, but his grandmother had died 8 years ago. These supplies looked more recent. Someone else had been using this cellar. Someone had been coming to this empty farmhouse to do terrible things. Daniel reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out a small water bottle he always carried while working. He opened it and held it out toward the alien girl. She watched him with those huge dark eyes, still afraid but also something else. Thirsty, desperately thirsty. She moved forward on her hands and knees. Every movement was careful and ready to flee. She expected him to hurt her. She expected the offer to be a trick. Daniel stayed perfectly still and let her come to him, her thin blue fingers wrapped around the bottle. She drank like she hadn't had water in days. Maybe she hadn't. When the bottle was empty, she looked at him, and something changed in her expression. Not trust. Not yet. But maybe a tiny bit of hope. More. Daniel asked, miming the action of drinking. She nodded. A human gesture. She had learned it from somewhere. Daniel spent the next hour with her in that cellar. He brought down more water and some crackers from his truck. She ate carefully at first, then faster as hunger overcame fear. He noticed that her hands shook constantly. He noticed that she flinched whenever he moved too quickly. He also noticed the broken device she kept close to her body. It looked like some kind of communication tool, cracked and dead. She held it like a child holds a favorite toy, even though it clearly didn't work anymore. As the sun began to set, Daniel faced a choice. He could call the police. He could report finding an alien creature in his grandmother's cellar. But then what? Government people would come. Scientists would come. They would take her away to some facility and do tests on her and ask questions she couldn't answer. And what about the people who had kept her here? They might have contacts in the police. They might find out where she was taken. They might come for her again. Daniel looked at the small blue girl sitting in the corner of his grandmother's cellar. She looked back at him with eyes that expected nothing good from the world. She had been hurt and caged and starved, and she had survived anyway. She was still fighting to live. Okay, Daniel said softly. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take you upstairs. I'm going to find you some clean clothes and a real bed. And tomorrow we're going to figure this out together. Does that sound all right? She didn't understand his words. But when he slowly extended his hand toward her, she looked at it for a long moment. Then she reached out with her scarred blue fingers and took it. Her hand was cold and small in his grip. Daniel helped her stand on shaky legs. He helped her climb the stone steps into the kitchen above. She squinted at the fading sunlight, like it had been a long time since she had seen it. Daniel Cooper had come to this farmhouse to fix up an old building and sell it. He had come here to keep busy so he wouldn't think about his dead wife. He had not come here looking for purpose or meaning or reason, to care about anything again. But life had a way of ignoring what people planned. He led the alien girl to the old couch in the living room and wrapped her in a blanket. She watched him with those huge dark eyes, still afraid but no longer running. That was a start. That was enough for now. Outside the farmhouse, the Kansas sky turned orange and purple as the sun went down. And somewhere out there, the people who had hurt this child were still free, still doing their business, still thinking she was dead or gone or forgotten. They were wrong about that. Daniel looked at the small figure on his couch and made a quiet promise. Whatever she was, wherever she came from, she wasn't alone anymore. And whoever had done those things to her would answer for it someday. But first, she needed to heal. First, she needed to feel safe. Everything else could wait.